Hey guys, so today Cynthia and I will be teaching you some things about World War One. Propaganda is defined as information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. From the beginning of World War One, both sides of conflict used propaganda to shape international opinion. Media such as newspapers, books, music, posters, and cartoons were produced in an attempt to influence both neutral and enemy countries. Propaganda posters were used to get men to join the army and women to work in factories and in women's land army. Posters were also used to get commons to spend their money on government bonds. A government bond is defined as a bond issued by a national government, generally with the promise to pay periodic interest payments and to repay the face value on the maturity date. Government bonds are usually denominated in the country's own. Women with children were often depicted on posters to get a person's empathy, compelling them to do what the message on the poster said. One common message, besides telling men to join the army, was telling commons to go without food and or not waste it in order to save it for the soldiers. The reason for this was food was very scarce in the war due to rat infestations and rationalization. So in order to feed the soldiers at least every couple of days, people would donate their own food. Music was used as propaganda to relate to the common people's interests. Most people had a piano in their homes, therefore using them as a source of entertainment and socialization. Since music was so common, it was easy to draw everyone's attention to the war using songs filled with patriotism, inspiration, and pride.
Women during World War One. Women were recruited into jobs vacated by men who had gone to fight in the war. The high demand for weapons resulted in the munition factories becoming the largest single employer of women during 1918. Though there was initial resistance to hiring women for what was seen as men's work, the introduction of conscriptions in 1916 made the need for women workers urgent. Around this time, the government began coordinating the employment of women through campaigns and recruitment drives. Railway guards, ticket collectors, buses and train conductors, postal workers, police officers, firefighters. Some women also worked heavy or precision machinery and engineering, led cart horses on farms, and worked in the civil service and factories. They received lower wages for doing the same work, and thus began some of the earliest amends for equal pay. In 1918, under the combined pressure of the NWP's public efforts and the Nassau's lobbying, President Wilson agreed to push publicly for women's suffrage. He addressed the Senate in support of the 19th Amendment to enfranchise women. In his speech, he argued that women's suffrage was needed to win the war and should be supported as a war measure. In 1919, both the House of Representatives and the Senate finally voted to approve the 19th Amendment. The amendment then went to the states, where it required approval by three-fourths of state legislatures before it would be ratified. Suffragists in the Nassau and the NWP undertook arduous campaigns in each state to win ratification. On August 26 of 1920, Tennessee's legislature approved the amendment by one vote, becoming the last state required to ratify the 19th Amendment.
Taking place on August 23rd, 1914, the Battle of Mons was a clash between the British Army and the advancing German army in Mons, Belgium. The British lost more than 1,500 soldiers in the offensive, while the German forces lost between 2,000 and 5,000 men. At the start of World War One, The British Expeditionary Force had around 80,000 professional soldiers, which was made up of volunteers and reservists. While it was the best trained and more skillful army, it was tiny in comparison to the French and German armies. They had well over 1 million men in each, and the Germans had 8 field armies while the French had 5. The Battle of Mons was the last of 4 battles of the frontiers that took place on the Western Front between the Allied and German forces in the opening months of World War I. The battle began when German artillery began to fire on the British. The Germans tried to push across 4 bridges that crossed the canal at Mons, which the British were holding. The Germans advanced on one bridge in a close column, which meant they were easy targets for the British riflemen. They were able to fire at the Germans from over 1,000 yards away, and the rifle fire was so intense that Germans thought they were facing machine gun fire instead. Since the British army was so small and they were already losing, and the German army had already began building bridges to approach the British army, the British army received the order to retreat and began to withdraw, which later became known as the Great Retreat.
So, how did women help in the war? They helped nurse the wounded, provide food and other supplies to the military, serve as telephone operators, the hello girls, entertain troops, and work as journalists. Many of these self-selected adventurous women found their own work, improvised their own tools, argued, persuaded, and scrounged for supplies. The army hired women nurses and telephone operators to work overseas, but as civilian employees, although in uniform. Plans for Women's Auxiliary Corps to perform mostly critical supply and communications work were shot down by the War Department. So were plans for commissioning women doctors in the medical corps. Nearly 13,000 women enlisted in the Navy and the Marine Corps on the same status as men and wore a uniform blouse with insignia. Alright, guys, this was the end of our presentation. Hope you liked it.